back here this morning with this DLT 3000. I did a video last week about the tires on this thing and getting them back on the bead. We got the tire in. We're gonna fix this thing up for selling it. Now I'm gonna show you everything we check out and everything we go over to get this thing ready for sale, and everything you should look out for if you're buying a riding mower. So if you're going to buy a mower, you should check these things out also before you buy it. Obviously, first thing is the tires, you know, are any of them dry rotted or anything like that. This one does have some dry rot on it from where it was sitting. Not sure, you can see it a little right there. Yep. We're gonna replace this tire with one that is different tread because I have never seen these tires before. These are Carlisle Turf Maxes. This thing up and we got a bunch of smoke out of it. It took a minute for it to start. Now that could mean quite a few different things with an engine like this. Oh, it looks like it has some LED headlights, so that's cool. So you started it up, it starts, but it smokes. That's something you really want to be wary of if you're buying a used mower and you don't know the status or where it came from. You don't know who it came from. Be very careful of that. I'm gonna pull these pins out of the front so we can get the hood open and I can show you the next things to look for. Now these pins just come out so you can flip the bumper straight down, and then the hood comes straight up and off after you unplug the headlights. A lot of times these LEDs kind of wreak havoc on an electrical system of these for some reason. I haven't seen any that have really worked too well, so we might end up putting regular bulbs back in. Mower started. It did hesitate pretty good when it went to start. On these V-twins, a lot of times that's a sign of a valve adjustment or an issue with the cam. Camshafts on them do fail quite often, but if it turned over pretty easily after a minute, I would check the electrical. See that there? That electrical on the positive, it's just real loose. That's probably why, is because of a bad electrical connection, is why it started like that, real slow. It could be an issue also with the solenoid or with the starter. Check the oil. If you see any silver in it whatsoever, pass. Oil level on this is good. Now we paid, I think, $225 for this. The guy was asking. I think he maybe was asking $250 or something. He said he'd take $225. Good mower for that kind of price. You know, we're just gonna tune it up and everything, and looks like somebody has a new filter in it already. What we probably need to do is go ahead and drain the fuel and see if that's the issue. But if you're buying something at this point, you're really taking a gamble with this. Now we have some oil around down through the bottom side. If you are buying this, you'll want to check all down around the engine. Make sure that there are no, see, it looks like oil down there. Really, one of the most common causes of oil being down in a spot like that is going to be a blown head gasket. It's all kind of down in those areas. It's kind of on the other side all around also. Looks like we've got something leaking from there. So I'm not really sure exactly where the oil's coming from. I guess it could be from the valve cover gasket or something like that, just leaking down. Doesn't look like there's any major seepage down at the sump gasket or anything. But it is pretty wet up front. Yeah, this down at the bottom. It looks like we've probably got some blown head gaskets, just based on the outside and what's going on. It could be the valve cover gasket leaking, you know, down and getting on there. We'll do a leak down test to confirm, you know, if there's a blown head gasket or not. That'll be our next step on something like this, since we already bought it. If it's something you're checking out and you see these same signs, I would definitely pass. This will tell you you're gonna have to do some pretty good work, which we knew when we bought it. And you know, it's just that slower time of the year, so we get to it as we can and fix it up and sell it. Steering seems like it's really loose up top. Where is all that play coming from? We're looking down in here. Everything's looking really tight. Looks like that other, look at the steering and it's not tight. You want to make sure to see where that's coming from. It looks like on this it's coming from the tie rod end. Most of that play is. The rest of it's just normal front end back and forth. We'll want to replace that along with those bearings. And let's check out the belt for the drivetrain. You can look straight at the belt and you can see the quality of it. Now that I think is a seam mark that I'm looking at right there. Other than that, everything looks perfect. I don't see any cracks or anything in it. If you do, you'll want to replace that belt. You can also put the brake on and you can spin the idler pulleys that belt spins on. They sit kind of right below here, and there'll be some idler pulleys. If you have that brake engaged, you can get up under here and feel them right along the belt, and you can spin those and make sure they're not making a bunch of noise. It looks like they're further up here, and I don't have that brake locked in. But spin them, make sure you're not getting a bunch of noise out of your pulleys, make sure they're not locked up or anything like that. As long as they aren't, you won't have to worry about it. We'll let this deck down next, and we'll check it out. The spindles look like they've seen some better days. Let's see. Idler pulleys don't sound real good at all. And then the belt looks like it has, oh no, that's not a bad spot. The belt actually looks okay. Thought it had a bad spot there, but I don't see. It feels soft enough. Looks like the brake here does not have a pad on it anymore. Looks like that's the same way on both sides. Oh no, the other one does. So we'll need the right brake. Let's see how the spindles are. We're gonna need a chute because the chute's broken here. I might have a used one laying around. I'd probably go ahead and just put some new blades on that. Oh, that's spindle. If you're grabbing your blade and you're moving it up and down, you can hear that. That's play in the spindle. That means the bearings are going bad or the housing's bad. You'll want to replace or repair that. If you've got a lot of extra time on your hands, go ahead and replace the bearings. They're kind of a pain to get off sometimes. Otherwise, just replace the whole spindle assembly. They're not going to be too much more. We're going to put new spindles. We'll put new blades on this, new idler pulleys, basically rebuild the deck. I don't think we're going to mess with the belts. The belts seem in pretty good shape. Get this belt or this brake going, side chute going, and then we will do a leak down test to confirm if there is a head gasket issue or not. That's the last step. Once we've verified that there either is or isn't, we can go from there what we'd like to do. I've probably got some other engines sitting here that would work for this, should it be a case where this wasn't worth it or that one side wasn't running. Now, not everybody obviously has a leak down tester that they can use at home. If you're doing this and you're doing it out in the field where you're testing this from somebody, unplug one cylinder. If you unplug one spark plug, you're just running on the opposite side. Now, they should run independently on each cylinder. You shouldn't need two cylinders to run. If it's not running on one cylinder, you know that it's either dead, you got a bad rod in it, it's got push rods that are bent or valves that are stuck or something going on where there's no compression to that side or there's no spark to that side. Both of them get the fuel from the same spot. There's that positive. In this case, we know that the number 2 cylinder is working. the opposite side here. I'm going to unplug it on that side. If you unplug one of these and they don't work and you're diagnosing it at home, you can check your spark, you can pull the plug out, and you can hold it against the side just with a rag, just kind of hold the spark plug, and look between the tip of the plug and where you're holding it against the metal at. If you visibly see spark, then obviously you know it's working. If you don't, you know that something's going on with either the kill wire, which we have a video on, or one of the coils, which we also have a video on a similar engine like this. Seems to run pretty good independently on each cylinder. I think what we're going to do is we're going to drain the gas right now, since it kind of smells like bad gas as we're taking a look at it. This fuel line up front, I don't know, it's kind of brittle. I'd really hate to take that off of there. Some of the Chinese stuff that they have, it's, if you use it from some of those carburetor kits or get it online somewhere, it's kind of like that. We're gonna have to take this whole top off and replace this fuel line also, even though I don't want to. Unfortunately, sometimes that's just what you have to do. It's like mostly 3/8 all around the outside. So we've just got a bunch of 3/8 space bolts all the way around the outside here so we can get that fuel line replaced. And then there's 5/16 screws on the top to hold the shroud on. Now that you've tested them independently, if you're in a sale, if you're not getting any smoke, they both seem to be running pretty good on each cylinder independently. You've checked all your belts out and everything like that. The next thing you'd want to do is go ahead and take it for a drive. See how the hydrostat transmission responds when you go from forward to reverse and make sudden changes. If it's slow to respond or you get a bunch of whining or anything out of it, you'll want to just note that, because that probably means that transmission is towards the middle to the end of its life, depending on how long it takes and how bad it is. Right. That off. .5/16 at the top. Off like such. And then the whole top pulls straight up. Oh, I missed one on the other side. Last one. Whole top pulls up and off. Unfortunately, to get to this front, you have to take the majority of that off to begin with. That's okay though, because if we get this fuel line replaced, I'm going to replace it from here, and then I'm also going to replace it to the fuel filter. Down on the inside where the head meets, I don't really see anywhere that it's, yes I do. If we look down in here, you can see pretty easily along the head, in between the head and the block, we can see Permatex. There's a Permatex right down in there, all the way down in. You can see that Permatex. So somebody's had these heads off before and done a dandy on them, is what it seems like. A bunch of build up down in there. Let's do the leak down test, see exactly where we're at. Again, if the transmission whines or anything like that, that'll be a situation where you'd want to pass also. Other than that, you know, really the situation with the deck, if the spindles and stuff are bad, as long as you're handy and have some tools available, that's not too bad to do either. Now this thing here, again, we would have seen that oil and probably passed to begin with. We saw it, and it's one of those things where you take the gamble on it. You know, for that kind of price, this is a mower that you stand to make a lot of money on if you can get it running right, and we have other parts and things like that around, that it shouldn't be any issue to get this going. We got the one fuel line replaced. Now to drain this, if you do not have, we've got like an electric fuel pump, we'll basically pull it off on this side of the fuel filter, since I think this is a newer fuel filter. We'll pull this off and we'll go ahead and suck the fuel from the tank from there and drain it completely dry and flush it all the way out. And then this fuel line will be replaced, and we'll drain that filter also to make sure that we know that the fuel in it is good and see how it runs from that point, because it was running pretty crummy originally. If you have this mower running and you're getting ready to buy it and you check the oil and you see smoke coming out of the dipstick hole, if you're looking down in, that's a telltale sign of a blown head gasket if it's blown internally instead of towards the outside. So beware of that. Know that when you go to buy one of these. If you don't have this, you can let the fuel pump out your fuel from here. So if this is hooked up, it's got to be in the valve cover so it can get the pulse. As long as your pulse line is hooked up, you take the outlet line here off and you can put it into a different line and just drain it down into a bucket. Once it's going down lower than the tank, most of the time you will not have to worry at all. It'll continue to flow until it's completely out or close to it. Very bad fuel line. It goes from here, goes up over, and then it drops down through the frame. Comes to here, and then it comes down on the backside, kind of like right here, and then drops down underneath the frame, basically about right here, right before it comes just right on the inside, drops down through, and then it rides all the way along the rail, right along the inside of that rail, kind of right here on the opposite side. You can see it right through that hole. That's it on the other side, and it goes straight up to a 90-degree in the bottom of the tank. Now I've blown through this, tried to get everything dried out. It's not quite dry yet. We'll let it dry for a little bit while we do this leak down test, and we'll replace all of that fuel line going up through to make sure that none of that breaks off, clogs up, and they don't have any issues with it once we sell it. To do a leak down test on this, we'll want to take the spark plugs out first. It does look like this wire is a little bit chewed, but it's not to the wire. Really, what we'll probably do is replace it with either a new one or a used one we have. Plug out. And this just makes the engine easy to turn over by hand for us. You can take the valve cover off if you'd like, and we can watch the valves. To use a leak down tester, we're going to want to be top dead center. So basically what that means is on the compression stroke, when your piston's coming up, when it gets all the way to the top, that's where you want to test this at. I'll show you exactly what I'm saying. Both of the valves will be closed when it's at the top of the compression stroke. Those are just 4 3/8 head bolts. So as we're coming up here, that is not completely open. That is not the compression stroke. It's still open. As we go back around, your intake valve is going in. It's coming back out. Your piston is going to be coming up at that point. So it's coming back up. And as soon as it gets to the top, that's where you're going to want to be. That's the top dead center of the compression stroke, because both valves are completely closed and the piston is all the way at the top of its travel. Now you can kind of rock this back and forth and figure out exactly where top is, especially without those spark plugs in. It's very easy to do. But if you're turning clockwise from the top, it'll be right there. And if you notice your magnet, if you've got the top off here, it's right as it comes to spark, because your piston is coming up, fuel and air is rushing into the cylinder, you get that spark, and that's what drives that piston back down in order to give you power and combustion. All right, so top, right there, top dead center. And we're gonna use a OTC 5609 leak tester kit. Now it's showing you exactly what your PSI reading should be, depending on what they are. Usually they say 5 to 10% at the very most as far as loss goes. And we'll go up to right about 100 PSI as far as the pressure goes. And this comes with adapters and everything like that if you need them. The original one on here works for what we need it for. Just gonna screw that into the spark plug hole. Again, there's a bunch of adapters if you got this one. A lot of times you can rent something like this from an auto parts store if you don't have something handy. We're just gonna hand tighten that. It doesn't have to be super tight. And we're going to, all right. Compressor is still going, but it might go off anyway. Just slowly give it some pressure. You don't want to go too fast because it can actually spin the engine. Slowly go up. We're at 35 and we're at about 34. So this is the output pressure and this is the input pressure. You don't want more than 10% difference from the input pressure to the output pressure as you're going up at top dead center. If you have that, you know you've got something going on or something leaking. You should also not be able to hear any air escaping anywhere. If you can, that means there's an issue. Let's go up to right here, almost to 100 pounds. And we're at, let's say right about, I don't know, 92, 4, 6, about 98 as far as what, but I hear some leakage somewhere. Let me turn this compressor off real quick and see. Now we're hearing some leakage coming from somewhere. And it's not from here. It's not from the spark plug hole. So we're not getting a lot of loss of pressure. I suspect that it's leaking to the outside somewhere. It's hard to tell right now. I'm just going to spray some Simple Green on it. See if we can get any bubbling from anywhere on the outside. Not sure exactly where it's leaking at this point. Definitely not losing a lot, but again, I'm not really sure where it's leaking from. I don't see anything to the outside. Oh, there it is. Okay, so that's just back into the crankcase where I'm hearing that leaking from, and that's not enough for us to be concerned as far as loss goes through the piston and cylinder. So that's all that's escaping through the rings is about 2%. That's pretty darn good. Let's go to the other side and do the same thing. So what we were hearing is that actually coming back through here, if I had to guess. And I was thinking it was coming from the outside of the head, that we needed to replace that head gasket or something. It's interesting. I don't know if that just fell down in there or if someone's had it open. It came open and off pretty easily. Do exactly the same thing and rotate this around while checking and seeing where top dead center is. So the piston's coming back up, your intake valve's closing, everything is good to go. Now if we were on the opposite stroke, we'd be coming up, and right as we're at the top, the intake valve would still be open. That's not correct. It's got to be on the compression stroke, which is when it comes up and both valves are closed all the way at that very top. Again, rock it back and forth, figure out exactly where that top dead center is. Both of those valves are. Oh, see how it turned my engine there? Easy enough. If you lose this, if you lose your top dead center, it's easy enough to mark on the flywheel back to the block where exactly your top dead center is. And you can do that with just a marker or anything that you want, really. That way you don't have to re-find your top dead center if you lose it. Coming all the way up. Right there, top dead center. Perfect. That should be pretty well perfect. And that's really with the magnet, you see, it comes, it's still coming up right now, and your spark comes, and then that's when it starts to come back down. Kind of right after that. So the magnet sits just shortly after. And again, both of those valves, you should be able to just wiggle these. If you can't, then you know you're not at top dead center of the compression stroke. Okay, this time I'm going to do it a little bit slower. Let me try to, it does get dangerous if this pops off on you and this takes off. You don't want your hands anywhere close to this, so be careful there. We're at 30 pounds, and it looks like 25 on the, so we're at 35 and it looks like about 33 on the meter. Let's keep going. Again, real slow so it doesn't just take off on us. We're at about 50 here, and we've lost a little bit. $65, and it looks like we only have about 60 on the output. Up to 80 pounds, and it looks like we have about 76 or so. We're at 100 pounds, and we're at about 92.46, so we're losing about 4%. And again, I think that's just through the rings. That's not a bad reading on this cylinder either. The other one is a little stronger, but you can check around the outside with simple green also and see if you get those bubbles. If you get any bubbles in between the head and the block from this while it's pressurized, that instantly tells you that you've got a blown head gasket to the outside. Real quick, easy test, because that air will actually be escaping all the way to the outside. I'm not seeing anything like that here. That's just escaping back down in, even though there's oil over here. So if I had to guess, that's because of these gaskets as opposed to what I was thinking with the head gasket. We've got everything else on order. I went ahead and pulled the fuel line grommet and elbow out of the tank. It sat right up in there and I just pulled straight down. Now we're going to replace the grommet. We'll put that back into the tank first and then put that nipple back, and then we'll put fuel line on it. Now we're going to use a 07-392 fuel tank bushing. And then we're also going to replace the rocker cover gaskets. These actually just came in, perfect timing, 690971. And then we're gonna adjust the valves while we've got this off. Now to do that, you wanna be on that same compression stroke, and you wanna be a 1/4 inch past top dead center. And what that does for you is that makes sure that when the piston goes back in at least 1/4 inch, it makes sure that the compression release is not engaged. So approximately right there, we'd adjust both valves at that. These are going to be 0.004 to 0.006 inches as far as the valve gap goes. To do this, this is a T40, and you'll need a 1/2 inch. And it's actually a 13 millimeter, not a 1/2 inch. Now, if you didn't understand what I just said about the top dead center, this piston's coming up on the compression stroke, coming straight up out. It's at the top right here. Now when that goes back down in 1/4 inch, that's where you want to adjust that. I actually don't think I was quite far enough to begin with. We're in a good spot right where we are. Go to the intake first. Go ahead and crack that open. And we're going to move our star all the way in until it's where we want it to be. And then we're going to set from there. So we'll set the nut. We'll hold the star where it's supposed to be as we're tightening the nut down against the set. All right, that is perfect. Now we'll do the exhaust valve. I want to tighten that just a little bit more. Sometimes you have to adjust them a bit after you've set them. It's not always going to be set on the first time. That's perfect. A lot of times, honestly, my freehand does a lot better than the rest. Now this has to be torqued to 100 inch-pounds. Check that those are tight. They will back off over time. And you'd want to do that actually before you set the valves. I've already checked that on both sides. Got the cover and the spark plug back on the other side. Put this cover back on. See what size fuel line we need. It's kind of a smaller piece to go to here. Get this hose clamp back on this other one here in a little bit. For now, we'll hook it up. I got a couple gallons of good fuel in it. We'll choke it and see what happens. Looks like they got the throttle set way too fast on high, so we'll have to turn that down some and wait for the rest of the parts. At least we can drive this thing around now, and it's starting to sound good. We got the parts in to get the rest of this taken care of. The only thing I didn't order was the rotary coil. I'm not really sure where this came from. It's a 11578. It was sitting on the shelf, so I'm going to use it instead of this one that has chew marks all out of it, or instead of ordering another one. Just took the boot off. Even OEM coils don't come with a new boot for some reason. We'll take the kill wire off, just pull it straight out, and then two 5/16 bolts holding it on. Clean up the magnet if you'd like, get it nice and shiny. Not going to affect your electromagnetic field, but it may make you feel better about it. And also clean up your studs where it's going to mount. These will be marked, whether it's an OEM or an aftermarket. It should always say this side out or cylinder side on one side. This one looks a little bit different. Again, I'm not sure where it came from, but the part numbers match. I don't normally use aftermarket coils on anything. Rotary has over the years improved a lot though. I have been happy with a lot of their parts. Hopefully this one doesn't let me down. Just throw a business card in there in between the magnet and the coil as we come around. I'm going to line it up exactly in the middle because this one is kind of hard. It doesn't overlap on each side very well to be able to space it. We've got that in there, kill hooked up. As far as tightening these, I'm going to use a hand wrench to tighten them down as opposed to the impact. You don't want to over tighten them, they're pretty small bolt sizes. Take the business card out. You can spin it around. You want to make sure the magnet is not hitting. If it's hitting at all, that's not right. It should not be rubbing or anything like that. If it is, take it back off and respace it. Throw this on here and we will make sure that we are getting good spark and that everything is working well before we put the top back on. Blinking high right there, but we know we were getting good spark because it was running good. Let me plug the other one back in and make sure it's running good. Again, it's still kind of high as far as the RPM goes. Okay, all that's hooked up, everything is working good. We are going to address the issue with the speed of the mower next. I will take this front off. It looks like just 1/2 inch, maybe 14 millimeter here. Nope, it's a 1/2 inch. Taking this off to kind of get a little better access and a little better view for us. The problem, it looks like to me, is that whoever messed with it before tried to, right here there's an arm, and that's what the spring for the throttle connects to. What they tried to do is they tried to bend this out. There's a bunch of marks right on this piece, and you can tell the whole assembly has been bent out this way, which puts more pressure onto the spring. We're just gonna take a regular old Phillips, see if I can't pry from the side and get it bent back. Okay, there we go. Very technical. Muffler is just kind of hanging there, but that's okay. If it falls off, it may get loud, but we'll still test the RPM. Running pretty good. That kill is kind of acting a little bit weird when I turn the ignition off. It doesn't seem like it wants to kill right away. It's kind of strange. I'm gonna wait for this. It might be able to grab on this bolt. Yeah. I was gonna wait for the muffler to cool, but it looks like it can just barely grab on. We'll tighten them back up while we can. Yeah, it was running way fast, just bending that tab back there. Got it basically perfect. I'll double check it by the end if there's anything, you know, if it's off at all. By the time we're all done with everything, I can readjust it pretty easily, you know, even from right here. And this just kind of slides down in these slots. They line up at the front. If you don't line those up, nothing else is gonna follow. Few different pins, starting with a couple on the front, the same on each side. Just take a pair of needle nose, take each one off. One back over here. I think that one's hard to see. Yeah, just pull straight out. And that's just for the cross member support. It pushes straight off towards the back. And you've got one here for the lift, pulls out, and then this bracket pulls off to the side. That holds the support, so you have to lift it up to take the tension off of it. This is also your adjustment for the deck. If you're going right to left, if you want to adjust it, if you bring this up, that brings this side of the deck up. And that's on the back side. For the front side, if you need it a little bit higher, there's an adjustment in the front where you would adjust those set of nuts. We can take the belt off, just slides kind of off towards the front. And then we just have, there's one right here. See if I can get a little bit better light. It should be a little better. Or not. There's a cotter pin or a pin, either way, that holds the cable on top. This one's kind of a pain because it is a cotter pin. I'll probably put a regular pin in it. Just gonna take it straight out though. And then there's a washer on top, but this washer should actually be on the bottom there. Okay. Just go straight, pulls out, and that comes right off. Get it out of the way. We just have that one other one on that side, or the two holding it on, and then we'll pull the whole thing out. We jacked the mower up just a little bit to get it high enough to slide this out. If you don't have a jack, or if it's sitting down and you can't get it off the ground, you'll want to lower these wheels, basically pull them to the highest spot up to allow you enough room to drag it out. It's still quite difficult if you do it that way. We've got it just slightly jacked up, and that allows us to pull the whole thing out. Pretty easy there. Seven-eighths for the top. Right out. Sometimes they don't like to come out right away. You'll have to hit them with the hammer if they don't. Now we got new pulleys and everything else, so I'm not worried about damaging them. If you didn't, you probably don't want to hit it with a hammer. Here's on the other side. This over here has a cover on the other side before you can get to the spindle assembly, and it's got T30 slots on the inside. Now those are 3/8 bolt heads. If you want to try that, a lot of times they are so rusted out that the 3/8 won't work, that you've almost got to use the Torx in order to get them out. And again, that's a T30. There's 3 of them, the other one's still stuck in there. Take the spring off of both sides. Just relieves the tension from the brakes. Put those just off to the side for now. And then we need 1/2 inch or 13 millimeter. Take these and remove the spindles on each one. I like to do one spindle and one brake set at a time since we're doing the brakes. Sometimes those have good grooves in them, like real bad notches and stuff. If they do, you'll want to replace that bushing piece. This is a brake, it should spin here. And then there's a washer that sits directly under it. You will clean that up well. Also, you can clean the washer real good. Just make sure there's not a bunch of rust up under there. That one looks great, actually. We'll lube it real good. Make sure that that sits there well when we get it back together. Grab the new one. Pay attention to where this goes. 9 times out of 10, your bolts holding the spindles on will break off. Depends on how bad they are. Obviously, those did okay. When you pull this off, there is a piece up underneath that sits in between the spindle and the deck. So you want to keep that the way it is, or at least I like to. Just put it right back on exactly how it was. You can see the blade assembly and everything. We're replacing all this, so we don't care. We're just going to toss it to the side and grab the new one. Replacement. This one comes pre-threaded. If yours doesn't have threads on the inside, you may have to thread it yourself. It's always a possibility depending on where you're buying these spindle assemblies from. And together just like such. I'm not going to put the blades on right now because I'll flip it upside down and check the actual blade balance once we're done with everything to make sure everything is in line where it should be. We will want to make sure this is in there like it was last time before we're tightening down. I don't think, I gotta believe it was like that, yeah. Okay. One started, so it's all pulled up tight. Make sure your spacer is up under here also. New pulley for the top, size it up, make sure the other one is the same size. Good to go. It's a little wobble there for what I usually like. Not gonna hurt anything. When we grab our new pieces for the brake, I like to grab and just, because they're kind of painted on there, you want them to be free, this bushing around the outside. I like to grab it and just kind of free it up. That way it actually spins like it should. You can put some lube on there. Just keeps it moving freely. Going where it goes. Make sure it goes inside that bushing. Is free, so when this engages it should come back like it does. We'll put that spring back here shortly. Work on the other side first. Half inch again for the brake. In good shape. Kind of rusty up underneath. And on the washer a little bit. Make sure that's cleaned up well, that way that brake operates properly. If not, it'll get stuck. Same thing with the washer. I don't prefer to get my hands all chewed up. Not bad though. Feeling pretty good. Oh, the other side's got some rust on it. Get that all cleaned off. Make sure it's nice and smooth when it goes back on there. Same thing here. Free it up. That one only 2 out of 3 broke. This came off a way, I don't know where it went back on, but honestly, doesn't really matter. There's no dimples or anything that match up. Sometimes they just get into kind of a little dent in one area or the other, and they'll stay up on there tighter if you put them back exactly where they came from, is the only reason I mentioned that before. Pretty good. Underneath. Number 3. Start the 3rd. All set for that one. Clean up for the brakes. I'm going to actually leave this off for the time being because I see another issue as I'm looking. It is not an uncommon issue. See it quite a bit. Take this spring off for the return for the time being so it can free float. That just pulls back and off. And that's for the idler return, so your brake comes back. Seems a little bit stiff. So we'll take this apart and we'll clean all that up and lube it up, get all the rust off of it over on the swing arm. The issue I see though is right here on this arm, there's a notch that's sitting. That allows the idler to get caught on the brake, because that's where the brake rides for this side, and then it will not turn off. The brake will not be able to come back when that's the case. The best way to take care of this is to grind this down at an angle back to where it should be. Now you can replace that whole swing arm if you'd like. That'll also solve the problem. That works well. I'm just trying to get the little burrs off the top and the bottom. Nice and even all the way now. Instead of having a notch that you could feel right here. That's all gone. Perfect. Fact, it's about to fall off the table. Okay. All set. Pull the 14 out. And we're going to first get the idler off. This is the one we're replacing. It was in real bad shape. Got a washer stuck to the top I was going to use for the other one. And this needed to go a little bit closer, so I'm going to bend it just a tiny bit so it sits closer to this when it goes on there. Got a replacement for it. All these part numbers are in the description. If you take this off in order to fix these bushings, you will want to make sure it goes back exactly how it came apart, because this can go as we remove it. This could go back down on there several different ways. It does not have to stop in the same spot. Well, it's up against basically the bracket on the right hand side. Keep everything the way it went and you won't have a hard time putting it back on. The whole assembly and everything actually comes up and out. We're replacing this belt. We'll take it off. See how much rust is in there? How much rust is up underneath? That's what was keeping this thing from coming back easily. That's quite a bit of surface rust, but nothing that can't be fixed. The cleaner you get this, the easier it's gonna move. It kind of looks like it's there, but I don't feel it as much. I think we're good. We've got this whole assembly. Same thing. If it has real bad rust around the inside, you'll take some flexible sandpaper and get it in there, because you want this to roll smoothly, especially along here. With all that rust, it's not going to roll smoothly there at all. Be careful when you're working with things close to your hands, obviously. I work with a lot real close and never really have any issues, but you can never be too safe. Looks good. The top doesn't really matter. Get this one switched out. Looks like both of those keepers are in pretty good spots, so I'm not really gonna pay too close of attention to them. If you don't get that washer on there, a lot of times you'll run into an issue where the nut will actually be small enough to where the pulley can work its way up and off. I've seen that happen quite a few times when customers have brought them in and tried to do it themselves. Moving in there real nice and smooth. With this up underneath, you'll see exactly how smooth this all goes back together with some shots of penetrating grease kind of all over everything. Keep it nice and lubed up. Probably add a bunch more in between and everywhere else. It goes on real thin and then it turns real thick after just a short period. Trying to think here All this just went back together. It went just like that. Okay. Doesn't take long to forget exactly how these went sometimes. It's looking good. Real smooth. And again, we'll tighten that down right against where it was. That same washer and nut. This down in, along with our other one. Oh, you know what? I think that's backwards. It's supposed to be this one. Got them backwards on us. That went, there it is. And this I actually bent just a hair too far. Bend it back, make sure both spin perfectly fine on their own. We can put pulley on the front. This other spindle that we didn't finish. That one spins quite a bit truer. Everything's free. Like that. I'm going to tighten this one up just a hair more. That other socket didn't work well on here. It almost seemed like it wanted to spin. I think I've got a 23 on it now is what I have on it. You can put the return back in here. It should all return very nice and easily, smoothly. It is working well. And when you have all these cleaned up, you can put your new washer down, new brake on this side in, install it. Still free. And again, that piece up underneath, we want some lube on both sides. And then we want some lube on the middle on both sides, and then all around those moving parts. Keep you nice and greased up. Couple of these springs. Closer inspection on this side tells us that this bracket is on wrong. I installed it in the wrong spot. Because if we try to put this spring on from here to there, it's not tight enough. These can go on a few different ways. I think it just needed to be rotated, just like such. I think that was the one I kind of dropped when it was coming off and didn't pay much attention to. That's supposed to be a lock nut or something. It just doesn't go on real terribly smooth. Everything spins freely. We can put our belt on real quick, and then we can put the screws back in for our assembly. Last spring. Now the spring has good tension on it. Over here where it's supposed to. New Husqvarna belt. Wrap these all through like they should be. Each side. Good. I'm not too terribly worried right this second about cleaning the deck well, because we power wash it all off afterwards. Get it 100% cleaned up. This deck does look like it's got a little surface rust to it, but nothing too terribly bad that I'm worried about. Everything as far as the brakes go, the brake is coming off on both sides when you engage it, so it's away from the pulley, and then when you let off, it's coming back, and then it stops it from turning. Both of those are working properly, and our engagement is working properly. It is good to go. The deck is good to go, except for the side chute. Many times I will just take a pair of pliers for the little keeper on the end, because it just comes and pops straight out. To put that back on there, a lot of times you can just barely lightly tap on the back, and then you can just push it right back on, and it's a keeper just like it was. To get this installed, it's pretty easily. Take it off just like it is. Then you install it on here, just like it was. Spring towards the back and line it all up. Once it's lined up and pushed down in where it's supposed to be, this will go straight through the hole. And watch on the side. I'm watching here and it's wanting to take off on me. Exactly, there it goes. I'm just lining up the bracket and everything. Pushing it on in. Now it's back on the inside. Just barely gonna hit this real lightly with a hammer. One time. All right. Keeper's on there. It's not gonna let it come off. Side chute works. Want to get as much of this off as you can, otherwise it'll gather moisture. That moisture sits on that metal and it just rusts out. Just better to be nice and free, no grass. That's why it's better not to mow your wet grass. If you're mowing your wet grass, this is what's happening. Up underneath, almost always. A lot of stuff up under there, even though it didn't look like that much. See what these blades look like. I have a 42-inch. Okay, those are them. Okay. On the other side. Looks like we're going to line up well also. There are two different sides to the washer. It's kind of cupped. You want the part that's higher towards the nut. You want the part that's cupped towards the blade. Just gonna hold it on there. Some people install those wrong if they come like that. Want to make sure these line up perfectly. The back side of each of these, as we spin it around, is perfectly lined up with the other. That means it's going to cut well. It's going to be even because the outside edges of those are at the right spots. If they don't match up, you've probably got an issue where the deck's kind of mangled one way or the other. You can also check at the outside edge. If you hold your finger here, so that one comes exactly to where the other one is. Same thing here. You hold your finger right to the edge, when the other one comes around, it should be exactly at your fingertip like the last one was. And this is. As I put the deck back on, I usually like to go ahead and pull the engagement over first. Makes it a little easier. For some reason I was thinking that went on top, but it does go on the bottom. That will work. This can go here. I was going to use just a regular pen, but it looks like this cotter pen is going to be just fine to reinstall. And pull it to the back where you get this back one all hooked up before you go any further. Once it's back up underneath, then we can start to lower the deck back down. Once it's into position, make sure this bracket is over this way. If it's not, you'll have to take the deck back off or take the bracket off in order to get it set up. Front hanger bracket, start with those. Okay, get my side, one side in, and then I got my back one right here. Get in, and slip my belt on. It does kind of hinder your ability to line things up if it has pressure under it though, so do pay close attention to that. A couple more on the other side. Right, one in, and one in. If we watch down below, take that sticker off that pulley, not that it's really gonna make much of a difference, if any difference. If we engage the deck, you can see both brakes come off and the belt gets completely tight. That's how it should be. Should have tension against it all the way through and nothing should be rubbing. If there's anything close to rubbing or anything rubbing, you want to address it before you put this into service. Everything here with the deck looks good. All we've got left is just the bearings and the drag link. Move the wheel again. To get these bearings out, I like to start on the side that has the greaser and empty them down through, and I'm just kind of got it at an angle to catch the lip. These sit in here like this, so this is sitting at the bottom, but it's sitting just like this. Catch the lip around the outside and just beat it down through. That one's out. Flip it around. Do the same thing to the other side. You just want to make sure you don't get along where this flat side is and ruin where your grease zerk is. Straight out. Clean those. Clean all that grease out. Just everything bad inside, all the old grease. Pull it on out. Put some new stuff in when we're all done. Where the grease zerk is, it goes right straight. The flat part goes towards that. What I like to do is grab a big hammer that's flat, and I like to hit it with another one straight dead on. Works pretty well. This one I usually like to put the same way, although on the opposite side it doesn't matter. As long as you hit it level, it'll go down on there nice and smooth. Perfect. Now the bearings are replaced and they're in there correct. We can put them back on. I think I'll actually leave it off right this second while we do the drag length. Looks like it's a 1/2 inch on top, 9/16 on the bottom. Ow. Didn't feel so hot. This sits just like such, so it has another one that goes straight up in, so we have to also remove the nut from that, and we'll hold on to the lock washer also, because we'll reuse the nut in the lock washer. On this side, I'm going to turn until it's closest to me so I can access it through here. And actually straight up through, I can get down in there with a socket. Guess it's all the way off. Not sure where the nut went. Guess it and the lock washer are just sitting right on top. What it appears. Let's put our new one up in there. Oops. New one goes just like such. Straight up in. And you put your lock washer and your nut on the opposite side, not on the same side like it was on that other one. Tightened up on that side. Other side. Get this in. Our lock nut. Our lock washer and our nut. Anyway. Might just jack this up a little bit more so I have room. Tighten it down here. I'm gonna put our one on there, and that fills all the gap. Looks like these are maybe a little bit wider, or didn't go in quite as far. And then we will put our cap over it. We'll do the same thing to the other side. And then we will make sure this deck is level. we'll take this thing for a cruise. As far as the deck level goes, we spoke about it previously, how there's adjustments in the front. Got adjustments here if you need to bring the front up. You'll loosen the back nut, and then you'll bring the forward nut back in order to bring the deck up in the front if that's where you need to bring it up. In the back, there's those adjustments that are 9/16 bolts that are right here. 9/16 nuts, I'm sorry, and those will allow you to raise the deck from side to side if it's off one way or another. Now, the first thing you want to do is make sure that the tires are aired up before you're going to level the deck. Battery terminals were one thing that were not tight whatsoever. We're going to replace these with new bolts. There's no real good way to get a good tightening out of a flathead bolt and a regular nut. Take the negative always off first, positive off second. And we're going to use 1/4 stainless steel, the bolts, washers, and lock nuts to replace these. Looks like I came one lock nut short. And we'll grab a positive cover for that also. There's a battery tray cover that goes in to hold this down also, which is kind of normal on these mowers, and I think I have a used one somewhere I can replace it with. Seems like it just keeps going on and on, doesn't it? No matter what, you get to the next step and you need something else. We're pretty well finished here though. Something to hold the battery down, either that cover or we'll just do some sort of bungee strap or metal strap to make sure that that doesn't slide anywhere and stays where it's supposed to. Let's get some greasing done. These front axles, honestly, and the inside of the tires are the only places on these that have anything that is greasable. Everything now runs well on this. Everything works good like it should. Put the hood back on. All this thing needs is just power washed up and sprayed down, and then it can go out for sale. Just goes to show you how much work there actually is that goes into some stuff like this when you get into old tractors, and how it can just keep going and going and going no matter where you think it's going to end. Hopefully this helped you in some way, shape, or form to get your mower back into working action or teach you something. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. we can take the boot off just by taking the pair of pliers and kind of yanking on it. That one's kind of stiff, so I'm going to get a torch. Things should be plenty toasty now. E-clip comes off. Looks like we've got 3 washers on this one. Normally it only has 1 or 2. Now before we take this off, this is something where if you have a jack when you're going to look at a mower, go ahead and jack it up and grab a hold of this tire and see if you can wiggle it side to side like this. See that play side to side, how it's wiggling on that shaft? You can hear it too. That means that the bearings on the inside of that tire are worn out. These don't actually have balls or anything in them. It's not a ball bearing. They wear out pretty quick. I like to put new bearings in them if there's any kind of play whatsoever. We'll do that. Switch the tire out first. I don't believe I have bearings for it, but that's okay. I wanted to get that tire done, that way we can move it around nice and easy before we get it up on the table. Tire we're using looks like deli tire. Tread is as close as I could get. What we do before we install a tire is we'll go ahead and install a rim on the inside of it overnight, make sure that it all pops out, the bead pops out. If not, you can use a strap around the outside. You can use a bead blaster or anything else to get these sealed to the bead. But right now it's nice and filled out. Eventually we'll take that valve stem out once we unmount this other tire. Break the bead. Now if you don't have a bead breaker or a tire machine or some way to do this, you can buy a portable one if you'd like, but otherwise it's very hard to do this. It can be done with just a tire iron, but it's much more difficult. Now this, you just push down and break the bead. Do that to both sides. It's very easy to do. Both sides are off. And we always do it with the valve stem side up, wherever the hole for that is. It's a lot easier that way. Just getting this tightened up against this rim. We're going to spray it down with some simple green. Get some good lube going. Then we're going to take our tire bar here and we're just going to throw it up under the underside and turn against that middle piece. Tire iron works the same way, just up underneath and over and around. Again, you can do this with a vise holding something like this. As long as you have a tire iron, you know, it is definitely possible. But this, you've got to be able to hold the rim in place with something, which is the hard part. Just a spin, hold it, and just work it around. Takes it right off. And do the same thing with the other side. Now you can spray that bottom side also. Usually it has enough lube on it that it'll just pop off. See how the lube got down onto the bottom also. This thing is extremely clean, it seems like so far. A lot of times you get them open and there's rust or bunch of buildup of stuff around them. This thing feels pretty well spotless around where the bead is. Take our valve stem out now. Now, if this has a bunch of sealant or if this has a bunch of rust or anything like that around it, you want to take a wire brush to it. We have, you know, something like this. It'll go on your drill and it just run it all along, get that all cleaned up. You know, you don't want that rubber along that inner bead either. If it's along right in here where the bead seals, it's going to keep it from sealing properly. The cleaner, the better. Get that finished up. New valve stem in, pull it through. All set. Now there is still a little bit of some residue around the outside. That's further outside the bead than where I'm worried about. All along the bead is perfect where it seals. Take the valve core out of the tube. Now when we install this tire, the bead is already kind of to the outside. It's already helped us to get this thing going. I'm gonna spray it down. And you don't need a special kind of lubricant. Some people will tell you you do. You don't need a bead sealer. As long as everything's 100% clear and clean, it's not gonna matter. It's gonna seat. Get some good grease on it though. We use the bead buster. A bunch of people have told me there's stuff out there that's a lot better and a lot cheaper. I'm gonna try some different stuff next time. We use this all around, and it does seem to help pop that bead, make everything seal a little bit easier. As long as you have some lube, it's good to go. You don't want to rip the bead or anything as you're putting it on. Should just kind of push on. Should be really easy. On the top one, I like to use the tire tool again. On that bottom one, should just lock right on for you. Tire tool, just take and hold. And then once you get to there, if you're having issues, push this down further so you get more of the bead down out of that area. And it'll come right straight around. Looks like I hit the valve stem a little bit. A lot of times with this method, and with us already having the bead kind of set back to the outside, it'll just air up without even having to remove the valve core or anything. There went both sides. We're at 16. I'm going to go just a little bit further. You can go up to twice what they're rated for. in order to seat the bead. If it won't air up immediately like that, what you can do is you can use the strap method that we show in another video. I like to leave them about 14.2, 14.3. And then when I check them the next day, if there's anything under 14 after everything settles, we'll throw it in the water and see if we see any bubbles. Spray them down. Anything with some soap content to it, all around the bead. See if you see any bubbles forming. There. If there's leaking, you'll see some bubbles forming pretty good. You can also go around the valve stem and around the valve core. The bubbles will be pretty big, or you'll see them actively flowing if there's leaking. Sometimes there's really slow leaks that you won't see right away, but the majority of stuff can be completely taken care of just like that. Now, some people were asking why I did not tube this tire. When I'm selling stuff and it's got dry rotted tires on it, I don't feel good about it. I don't like to sell them that way. That's why we're not going to tube it. We didn't tube it. Didn't really talk about tubing it much. Around here, there's a lot of locust trees we see, and people like their tires to either be, you know, good, aired up how they are, or a solid tire. We do those occasionally also. Make sure that there is a washer behind it. Make sure that washer didn't fly off. And the part with the valve stem goes out, especially on these Craftsmans. We've got our 3 washers and then our clip. Now normally I'd wipe this all down real good. We're gonna have this all back off here shortly to replace those bearings. I'm just getting this on here in order to be able to move this thing around.